The Israeli government continues to accelerate the expansion of settlements in the occupied West Bank. Now, most countries consider this to be in violation of international law. A UN report says that the policy has led to the displacement of tens of thousands of Palestinians in the last year and a half. DW's Emily Gourdin sent us this report.
In March of this year, the Israeli Security Cabinet secretly approved the establishment of 34 new settlements on occupied Palestinian land in the West Bank. 10 of them are outposts, like Hashalom Farm here, which under these new measures is being retroactively legalized and turned into an Israeli settlement called Ramat Ein Tzufim. This legalization often seems contradictory, because in theory, outposts in the occupied West Bank are legal both under Israeli and international law. So in a world where Israelis continuing to build illegal communities on Palestinian land has become normalized, is there any meaningful difference between those that have been officially legalized by Israel and those that are not? As it turns out, barely. To start with, the vast majority of outposts and settlements have been built here in Area C, which is under full Israeli military and administrative control.
About 5-6 years ago, as the settlers felt more and more emboldened, they changed the goal. And the entire terminology and strategy has changed. We are not anymore in the battle over Area C. We are in the battle over open spaces, A, B, or C.
However, the perception these settlers are acting on their own with no help from the state or the Israeli military is a long-standing misconception.
That's not to say that unauthorized outposts are not connected to electricity and water. They are. In practice, there is close to no enforcement against them. Most of them are getting massive support from the Israeli government in terms of funds, infrastructure, connection to utilities, etc., etc.
As early as 2005, a government report documented how the civil administration in the West Bank was connecting outposts to the water and electricity grids of existing settlements. Today, under the pretext of so-called security roads and security components, Israeli rights groups have found that government money is regularly funneled through the civil administration to illegal or unauthorized outposts, meaning they already receive indirect support from the State of Israel via its civil administration.
They're looking for loopholes and ways of how to give money to outposts directly, formally, yeah, but it's not in a scale where okay, we're approving an entire neighborhood of 600 housing units, and the infrastructure for that will be subsidized up to 50% by the government, which is millions, right? That cannot happen in an outpost. That is what's happening in a settlement.
Under the ruling coalition led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, so far 102 settlements have been legalized, including the batch of 34 in March. To put that into perspective, that's more in the past 2 years than since 2012 combined. So why the drastic uptick? Some point to it being the fulfillment of publicized policy goals. Back in September of 2025, far-right Israeli minister Bezalel Smotrich presented a plan aimed at preventing the establishment of a Palestinian state, whereby Israel would annex 82% of the occupied West Bank and Palestinians would be restricted to 6 ghetto-like cities. When we asked why the Israeli Security Cabinet approved so many new settlements in the occupied West Bank when they're illegal under international law, government spokesperson David Mencer replied saying, "Jews come from Judea, the clue is in the name." Hashalom Farm, one of the outposts recently legalized, is not far from a settlement called Naale. Their locations convey Smotrich's plan in action.
From here they try to create a continuity between the settlement of Naale there and in the new outpost in order to take all over this area.
Hashalom Farm was set up in the summer of 2025 next to the Bedouin community of Ain Ayoub, which lived on agricultural land that belongs to the Palestinian village of Dir Amar. From Hashalom Farm, settlers have been launching violent attacks on nearby residents, resulting in the forced displacement of the entire Bedouin community in August. Settlers have also prevented farmers of Dir Amar from accessing their land.
I'm scared to plough the land and to harvest the olives. They'll tell me it's forbidden. First the settlers will come, 1 or 2 at a time, then the army will come, and they'll kick us out. They don't want me to work on my land.
Palestinians are left isolated and deprived of access to land and resources, while settlers are rewarded.
Once you retroactively approve an outpost, it's a whole different ballgame because you will have a formal master plan. you can build proper neighborhoods, entire neighborhoods. Yeah, you will have millions coming in for development from the government. So it's a whole different stage of development.
Well, my next guest is Sven Kühn von Burgsdorff, the former EU envoy to the Palestinian territories. He is part of a group of former diplomats who have written and signed an open letter warning that EU credibility and the prospects for a Palestinian state are rapidly fading. They are calling for a ban on trade with settlements, sanctions on violent settlers, and a review of EU-Israeli ties. Mr. Kühn von Burgsdorff, it's good to have you with us. This letter that you signed is unusually blunt. It argues that Europe can no longer condemn settlements while continuing business as usual with Israel. What pushed you to speak out now?
Yes, so thank you for having me, Mr. Goff. This is not the first time we are speaking out. This is the 8th public declaration of this group. We started in July last year with about 20 former ambassadors. Now we soared to more than 450 former European ministers, diplomats, senior officials, including 2 prime ministers and dozens of ministers. You can see, Mr. Goff, that there is a growing concern amongst our group of former senior officials with the inaction of Europe and the key member states, including my own country, Germany, with the fact that Israel continues with full impunity to continue settlement expansion and subjugate Palestinians and suppress their rights and their right to self-determination. That's the reason why we spoke out now, and the reason why we chose this time in our 8th declaration, the E1 settlement, is because if this comes to bear, that actually contracts will be awarded after July this year, then a physical barrier will be created between East Jerusalem and the West Bank, making the contiguity of a Palestinian state, meaning Jerusalem and the West Bank, impossible, and thus make it impossible to have a 2-state solution.
The Israeli government, it argues that these communities are necessary for security and that they're rooted in historical and biblical claims to the land. Why do you reject that argument?
Sorry, international law is inspired by theological arguments. Is that the argument? We have a clear decision by the international community. And by the way, the International Court of Justice in its ruling in July 2024 clearly said that Israel's occupation of land since 1967 and the ensuing belligerent occupation is unlawful. As a matter of fact, they used the name segregation or apartheid when describing the situation of the regime applied there. So this is not a matter of, do the Jews or the Palestinians have a historical right? There is a clear ruling of international law as that the Palestinians have the right to their state, and we are talking about Palestinian land, not Israeli land.
Settler violence in the West Bank, I'm sure you're aware, it has become an increasing focus internationally. I'd like for you to take a listen to what the Israeli ambassador to the UN said last week, and then I'm going to get you to react to that. Take a listen.
The term we hear here in this council, settler violence, how many times? Is used as a blanket label. It suggests that an entire community is defined by violence. That is simply not true.
From your experience, you heard the ambassador there, how much of this is isolated extremism and how much reflects broader political realities inside Israel today?
I was the EU ambassador to Palestine, or the occupied Palestinian territory, for 3.5 years. I left my post on the 31st of July 2023. I have encountered numerous times, it's documented on TV and radio and in news, numerous times deadly assaults on Palestinians by Israeli settlers in collusion with Israeli security forces. I'm sure you're aware, and you have had a very good report in this show here. You're aware that last year, 14 Palestinian people have been killed by violent settlers in the West Bank. This year, 15. Actually, more than 1,000 Palestinians have lost their life in the West Bank alone since 7th October 2023, either by terrorist settlers or by IDF, by security forces. So there is a serious concern with violent settlers. The EU in 2024 sanctioned a couple of settler groups, but unfortunately they didn't go further and didn't sanction any extremist politicians, ministers. Now we want, with this group of former ambassadors and former ministers, we want that all those responsible for annexation, for settlement expansion, including the E1 tender, actually are subject to restrictive measures, and that they're forbidden to do business in Europe and with Europe. And one last word, Mr. Goff, regarding the importance of the International Court of Justice ruling. The International Court of Justice declared in 2024 that the occupation of Palestine is illegal by Israel. How come that Europe and Germany, for that matter, continue trading with the settlements, continue investing in settlements? That's impossible because the ICJ requested UN member states and EU member states to stop all business activities which prolong the illegal occupation of Palestinian land.
Let me pick up there. Your letter warns Europe that it is damaging its own credibility globally. And is this fundamentally about the perception of double standards, especially after Europe's strong position on Russia and Ukraine? Is that what you're trying to point at?
No, we are pointing that out, not just trying to. We have 20 sanction packages adopted against Russia, and rightly so, and justifiably so. Not a single serious sanction package against Israel, despite the fact that more than 100,000 Gazans have lost their life, 140,000 are injured, and the other figures I mentioned. So we are actually applying double standards. And if the EU wants to regain moral high ground and influence across the world, and notably amongst the Global South partners, it has to stop this hypocritical application of international law. It's not a matter of convenience, it's a matter of being consistent with our own foundational values as EU, and by the way, as Germany, where we have in our Grundgesetz, in our basic law, a requirement to adhere to and respect and promote international law.
You dealt directly with Israeli officials during your posting time. When European diplomats raised concerns privately about violence or about these settlements, did Israeli leaders, did they still take Europe seriously? Or did they already believe that there would never be any consequences?
No, they don't take us seriously. Netanyahu, and also Trump for that matter, thinks, and probably rightly so, that we are simply a paper tiger. We do rhetorical condemnations, express our concern, but where is the meaningful action? When did we seriously stop arms support and exports? Did we suspend the association agreement with Israel, although Israel is in clear breach of Article 2, the essential element, the human rights clause? Did we stop and ban trade with settlements? How many ministers have we sanctioned? Not a single one. None of these things which have to be done and which we are doing with Russia is being applied and done with Israel.
I want to ask you, before we run out of time, if Europe does nothing beyond issuing condemnations, as you've accused it of doing, what do you believe the region is going to look like 5 years from now?
I think Europe forfeits its significant leverage. We are the biggest trade bloc in the world. We are a norm shaper. We enjoyed in the past the reputation as a soft power to promote better than anyone else democracy, human rights, international law. We are failing big time right now on this soft power pretension of ours. And that is very sad. And that's the reason why, especially in a world of hegemonial great power politics, where increasingly might makes right, we need to regain the importance of defending international law. Because in a world without law, it will be a jungle. And Europe has to stand up to its values, which made it actually, when it came into being after the Second World War.
Mr. Sven Kühn von Burgsdorff, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and sharing your position on this. Thank you.